afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Democratic View. I'm the hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and who I have with me today is somebody I think you're going to be very happy to get to know. His name is Greg Fischer, and he is a candidate for our state senate. You know that place up in Albany? Well, that's where he wants to go. It'll be a little chilly up there. So I hope you got a good warm coat.
Yes, thank you.
And anyway, we're going to find out a lot about this man. Tell us who you are and all about you. Born, raised, school?
Well, my name is Greg Fischer. I have 4 children, 2 older, 28 and 30, and 2 younger, 12 and 9. I have 3 degrees in business. I have a 35-year career in business management and business consulting. I've worked for big firms like Pricewaterhouse and Pete Warwick, and I've had my own firms. I've had an accounting company, a computer company. Right now, and for a while, I've been semi-retired, and I take some of that time and I volunteer and mentor and consult for free through SCORE, the Service Corps Retired Executives, which is part of the U.S. Small Business Administration, the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we actually do a lot to take people from unemployment and put them into business. And we also do turnarounds and transitions of companies that are going between generations of owners. We help people do inventing, and we've had classes for children in middle school and high school. This was my innovation, actually, to bring this to SCORE, to partner with the U.S. Department of Commerce's Patent and Trademark Office to teach children about patents and how to do patent research. And we get them little notebooks, inventors' notebooks, and protractors, and compasses, and colored pencils. And yeah, it's a really great, fulfilling quest. And it's like what I used to do, a lot of the consulting, except I don't have to issue proposals. People come to us, and I don't have to send out any bills. It's just a joy.
I'm laughing because my 9-year-old granddaughter, when you ask her what she wants to be, she says an inventor. But I don't know what she wants to invent.
Send her. You know, the Riverhead Library keeps my schedule there, and just send her. I mean, I have regular hours.
And you live in Riverhead, right?
Yes, and I also have a residence in West Hampton Beach as well.
Now, you didn't tell us where you were born and raised.
I was born and raised in New York City. I spent a couple of my years with Pricewaterhouse in Chicago. Came back to New York. And
you were born in Brooklyn, no?
No, I was born in Manhattan General Hospital in New York City.
Oh, yeah. And that's where you were raised in Manhattan?
Well, to some degree. And then I was fortunate enough to be sent away to some schools, prep schools they called them, I guess.
Yes, oh, I know all about those.
Yeah.
I've been a teacher in private school.
Yeah, yeah.
I know all about those fancy places.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But my 4 children have gone through the public school system. I've been very active there in trying to improve things and comparing things between different schools and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
So what are these 3 degrees and where did you take them?
Well, there was Manhattan Community was a degree in management, and New Paltz, State University of New Paltz was finance concentration, and State University of Albany was what's called production and operations management, basically running bigger companies.
All the stuff I know nothing about.
Well, yeah, you don't have to.
No, I know. I know it's not my thing. Business is not my thing.
So I think I add a different perspective. There's a lot of lawyers in government. There's very few people that understand business. And of course, one of the acute problems we have nowadays are loss of jobs, loss of businesses, moving out of state. It's very difficult to be expert in something you didn't have in your history. So if we have 60 lawyers in the Senate and only a couple with other specialties, you're going to get the same experience multiplied 60 times. And it doesn't provide something the state really needs desperately right now in a legislative body.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, particularly for our upstate area. Mm-hmm. You know,
it's terribly blighted.
Yeah.
But even for Long Island, we look at our bottlenecks.
Oh, yes.
I have proposals and things which are New Deal type projects. Of course, the New Deal and Roosevelt made this country really great in terms of our industrial base. Otherwise, we'd all be speaking German right now. But we had the opportunity.
That's Sabina. That's my technician.
I'm sorry. She's going to erase all the film. But,
No.
but what happened was they built tremendous things in terms of roads and bridges, et cetera. Well,
Yes.
California has had double-decked highways for decades. And we have the LIE, which is a complete snarl, and you can't move trucks, you can't move cars, it has no public rail or other public access up the middle. So I'm proposing to double-deck the congested sections of the LIE. And it's a big project, it's a long-term project, and it's a necessary project. And I'm also in favor of the Cross-Sound Tunnel, especially now that tunnel technology is so much better. If you use the tunnel project from Great Britain to France.
Oh, incredible.
It's incredible with public transportation. It's very
Yes.
modern. It's a green project. It'll bring out the best in us to do these projects. Plus, we can look at a new way of organizing the governmental structures beneath. We could go down anywhere virtually on the island and not disturb any shoreline communities where it's been controversial. We can come up anywhere on the other side. And I would propose that other side be another New York location, not to create a port authority between states where the money really disappears. Because those tolls.
People don't realize the Port Authority is a private group.
Yes.
It doesn't belong to
Yes.
the government.
And it's gone off into other things, real estate investing, and it's a lot of disappearing money that needs to be returned to the taxpayer. Just bring the tolls down. So that needs to be fixed. But these projects, they're challenging.
And what about that railroad that only goes with one track?
Right.
I mean, come on.
Yes. Tunnel technology could make it so that we could literally put mass transit all the way down the island and not interrupt much. You can have the stations in the middle of the median at the LIE or across the LIE or somewhere else, not too obtrusive. There's a lot of opportunity, but not a lot of vision. So when John Kennedy talked about going to the moon, he didn't say we're going to the moon, this is how we're going to build the LEM or the spaceship or anything, or the rocket. He just set the mission. He set the goal. And it was up to many, many people to step up and be inspirational and inventive.
And all those jobs that were created at
Yes,
that time.
and wealth. It created
Yes.
middle-class wealth with great vision.
Yes.
So we don't really have much of that. And I'm hoping in the process to also inspire other leaders to start to think that way.
Gee, I love it.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that there's somebody who could, because as a school administrator, the one thing you must have when you run a school is a vision.
Absolutely.
Of what you think you would want the school to really do for the students. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about people having an idea of how to increase and make things better for people. And that doesn't always just mean, by the way, development. It means making what you've got work. You don't have to develop to put to make that railroad more effective than it is now. Imagine what would happen in the summertime if that railroad was accessible to people who wanted to come out here for spend some time.
And it doesn't have to be big trains. It could be little cars.
That's right.
And there's a gentleman that does a show up island, Ernest Fazio. He wrote a book on maglev transportation, and he's been pushing this agenda for a long time. And it's time we start to get into this virtual energy free, almost energy zero transportation and creating a better transportation network for Long Island. We need it desperately.
We certainly do. There is a bunch of statistics that I've had for a long time that really kind of stick in my brain, which is in 1950, there were 250,000 people in Suffolk County. And ain't a lot of folks.
1.6 million we know of.
That's right. Now.
I've had the opportunity of working with various groups. There's a Salvadorian embassy in Brentwood, for example, and they've recorded that there's about 300,000 recorded Salvadorian immigrants on Long Island naturalized. But they're estimating that there's another 400,000. So we have a very, very large number of people here, and we have not evolved in terms of our economy.
Even in the Suffolk County Water Department, they're still waiting for them to come up with the final plans for a septic system that mitigates nitrogen, because obviously we can never sewer this place, and we got to work on this kind of thing. And you know how many years since I'm doing this show, I've been talking about this?
It's a political snafu. It's complex because we are block by block in that analysis. There are places that will be fine with sewers. There are other places that need advanced systems. There are other places that would be fine with leach fields to put the nitrogen at the surface. So it really has to be analyzed at a detailed level.
Well, that's one of the things that you mentioned before we started the show, which is that this large area we're talking about consists of many different communities who have different needs and different problems that need to be addressed.
There was a proposal to split Suffolk County in half. Mr. Laval was on it, my opponent, and Mr. Thiel is still on it. And it was to create Peconic County, the 5 East End towns, separate from the rest of Suffolk, saying that the 5 East End towns didn't get proper representation. I believe there is a problem with representation, and that's why I'm running. But I think, considering our economic situation right now, the idea of now upsetting the apple cart, just at this point in time, and saying we're going to split Suffolk County Police in half, we're going to split the Water Department in half, we're going to split Public Works in half, therefore Highways in half, and Health Department, all these other departments, and then add the cost to somebody of all the new buildings and all the new infrastructure and everything, I think that that's not really possible. So you have to go back to say, okay, leadership and planning and vision has been the problem, so how do we attack that? And the answer is really, you have to replace the people that haven't provided it. Mr. Laval has had 40 years in office, and he's about 80, and he's got a track record. And at this point, he's done very well for himself. He's the largest double dipper in the state, according to the Daily News. He's proposing a 47% increase in salaries for legislators. And he just says he gave up his law practice because Toomey Latham Shea lost a senior partner that hired him or brought him on. And now he is full time to legislate. Well, we waited 40 years for that. So what's going to change? So you can only change the players after a point in time, and I'm it.
And also, when you factor in the age, even though I'm pretty sort of getting toward that sort of thing myself, there are some people who don't keep up with the times.
Right.
And I suspect that he has not.
Well, I've been around that. I went to a health expo that he did, and which is generally a good thing. But at the same time, they were pushing particular vaccines that shouldn't have been given to certain people without warning. Come on, just step over and get a shot. That they weren't even reading the inserts or providing them to the people they were going to give shots to. Anybody with an egg sensitivity, anybody who had been sick, anybody who was going to have a child within 90 days. So it was all right there on the insert. But they're just saying, oh, it's great, just come on and get a shot. So that's an issue, as opposed to an old mentality of saying it's universally great. Saying, no, we have to really take personal responsibility for our health. Please read this insert, see if it applies to you. As well, he's talked about getting a supercomputer for Stony Brook. Well, in the 50s, 60s, and maybe even 70s, supercomputer was a great word, and it meant a big distinction between computers. It's not that big a distinction anymore, so I don't know if that's the great advantage of adding another block of funding to SUNY. He also wants to do a lot of privatization on SUNY property, not just SUNY Stony Brook. He wants to do it in Buffalo. He wants to put commercial building there. Well, at this point in time, we have more commercial square footage in Suffolk County than ever before available. So why would we now have government competing with the private sector and further eroding the value in the private sector by throwing money at it? We just see the scandal with the Buffalo Billions. They threw SUNY up there is getting $4.2 billion. And that works out to $138,000 a student per year. And if you add in the graduation rate, it's over $1 million a kid to get him through.
Oh, wow.
It's shocking. So he sits on both education committees.
Yes, he does.
And he's on the K through 12, We got Common Core, it was a complete snarl, and now he thinks it's a bad idea. So why didn't you stop it? So it's a matter of not going through the details. That's deadly. It's deadly in our personal lives. So I'm a person who's very detail-oriented and does homework. And in high school, one of the ways I made money was to do other people's homework. I hate to say that now. It's kind of sinful in today's
I wish I had known you.
Yeah.
No, I did my own homework.
So, but I don't let things slip, and that's been my career also, to pay attention to details for other people. That's what consulting is. And when you have a situation that isn't going properly, to pull the rug out from under it and change it, not allow it to proceed as it's been going. I look at this. Mr. Laval made a comment, said, well, with the corruption you're finding and with you're overseeing now SUNY and their budget, maybe you should be a comptroller. No, I should be a senator. There should be a senator looking at these things.
Right, right. And, another one of the big issues, of course, that we know about that's facing Suffolk County is this whole water quality thing.
Yes.
We know that we're going to have CPF, which we will be voting on to renew
2 weeks.
for the next...
Shortly.
Yeah, we'll be voting on
8th.
Election Day. The only thing is you've got to turn over that ballot
Right.
and mark it on the other side.
Right.
But part of that will be going towards financing or helping to finance or to at least attack the water quality problem, which is really,
It's a very important and very complex issue.
I mean, if you have people like where I live in the Springs on half acres and quarter acres, and they have to replace their septic systems, that's a big deal.
Yeah, they need advanced systems there.
Yeah.
And also, one of the other options that hasn't been talked about when we talk about nitrogen, we need to come up with probably new plumbing codes where we split the waste, because shower waste isn't necessarily nitrogen laced, but your bathroom is. So we have to really rethink this, and there's been no discussion about splitting the bathroom waste from the shower waste or your food disposal, or a better way of doing that. As well,
Gee, I never thought of that.
yeah, you have to do that. You just have a change in plumbing codes. Therefore, you can have a lot more efficient system dealing with what really causes 75% of the nitrogen problem, which is your bathroom.
It's called urine.
Right. So just take two pipes out of you. If you have 2 bathrooms, you run them into this unit. You don't have to process as much water.
Wow, you seem to have quite a broad view on a lot of these problems that we are facing that are very important for this.
I do my homework. I read a lot.
I can see that. You and me both. If I'm late getting here, it's because I've been reading.
It's always driving here.
I wish I could drive and read.
Yeah, I wish I could
Unfortunately,
too.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But, it's very important to have somebody with another kind of progressive view
Very much.
of what's happening in our area. Scallop seasoning is opening up pretty soon.
Yeah.
And,
Not as impressive as it used to be, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Nothing is
Yeah,
as impressive as it used to be.
Shellfish is in tatters. That industry's in tatters. The quality's in tatters. A lot has to be done. I actually own an office also that's on the Peconic. Has Peconic as one of its borders. So I'm watching this in the tides. I'm contemplating what we can do in terms of harvesting overgrowth, so that we can either do ethanol or fertilizer or some other way of dealing with it. They're doing some of this overseas, cutting some of the overgrowth and using it for other purposes, harvesting the dead fish. Riverhead has a huge dead fish problem, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, they have a huge die-off during the tides, deoxygenation, and yeah.
I know all about oxygenation.
It's terrible, and so they are scooping things out, but they're not. There's no longer-term plan.
And they're not taking that fish and using it for fertilizer?
Not really. No, they're just dumping. They could, because
Where's Squanto? He would have told them.
exactly. And what did you do? What is homemade fertilizer? You took a fish and put it in a blender, added water, and put in your plants.
That's right. That's right. Oh, amazing. Yeah, well, all of those things are very important. So you have a really fresh look at this kind of thing. And this older gentleman, to put it kindly, is not quite so aware, and I know he works very much in conjunction with Mr. Thiel.
Yeah, well, Mr. Thiel's been pushing his wheelchair for a while. You know, nature created it so that there was transition. You know, there's a cycle. There's the wheel of life and renewal. And we have to realize when it's our time to move on. And he could have retired. His party could have put somebody else on the bench or you know, to eventually replace him, but they chose not to. I think that's unfortunate.
Well, I mean, they chose not to because, you know, as long as somebody is winning, you know, why do you want to, you know, change horses?
And this is such a difficult district. It is 80 miles long. So it requires tremendous resources and commitment of the voters to want a change and not be just satisfied with the same name. I believe this is a huge year for desiring change. And let's see if voters will actually read the front side of the ballot.
Oh, dear. Please. After last night, I'm very concerned about this election,
Yeah, the
as I have
debates,
never been.
Yeah.
But I do think that you certainly have a great deal to offer and a new perspective
Thank you.
for people to really think about and realize that it is time for us to advance in certain ways, even just the electricity type of thing, the grid and all of that. As I mentioned, National Grid wants to have a big, you know, new raise.
That is a tremendous area for improvement. If you look at the types of technology, well, first, the solar rebates have died. That's a mistake. That needs to be fixed. I think we're only close to 3% penetration on solar roofs, and that's a shame. I wouldn't have ever thought to have cut those benefits until we were at least at 15%, at least. So I think that's a shortfall in legislative planning. As well, if you talk about the areas of the island that have natural gas available, there's two things. One is the equipment that they're offering rebates on is junk. It's not good. There's American-made equipment that's for heating, that's 97% efficient, and the exhaust tube, you don't even use your chimney, you can't. It comes out so cold, it's using so much heat, it's so efficient that you can't use your chimney. It would condense in the chimney. You'd have vapor, you know, liquid water vapor in the chimney. So there's that. And there's other technology hitting the market called micro-CHP, micro-combined heat and power. So for making heat in your house in the winter, also at high efficiency, you now get free electricity that you pump back into the grid on a net meter, and you have electricity free for the rest of the year. So there are brilliant new things with no leadership behind them. That's frightening. It's kind of like driving blind.
Another thing that of course, one of my other issues is also all of the lines that we have on Long Island, you know, which are really very ugly. And of course, we know what PSEG did in the village and through part of East Hampton by putting these enormous poles with this substance called penta on, which of course gets into our groundwater. And, you know, those poles are meant to stand winds of 125 miles per hour. But on the storm of 38, which they call the Long Island Express,
Oh, funny.
those...
I never heard that name before.
You never heard?
Oh, is that the one where the house roofs wound up in Connecticut, that one?
Oh, not only that, but the splash, the splash of the surge of water also wound up in Rhode Island.
Oh, boy.
So, I mean, that was a storm.
Yeah.
And the winds on the cyclonic side, the eastward side, were 150 miles per hour. So those huge poles, which are enormous, you got to really see them. It's incredible. And they would fall on those houses and probably split them. And it's really something that should be changed. I mentioned to somebody that I had seen a film on Italy recently where they were showing all of the towns. And I was, I've been there all the... And I suddenly realized there was not one pole with electrical wires in any part of that country. And I thought to myself, why are we so behind the times?
Right. I'm for underground as much as possible. Absolutely.
I mean, really and truly, there's so much infrastructure that needs to be brought up to date.
Actually, my house in Riverhead, when LIPA proposed another substation, our civic insisted that all the wiring be underground to and from the substation. And my house hasn't had a blackout since.
Boy, are you lucky.
I am lucky.
I had one in Sandy, and then I was surged.
Oh, boy.
When they put it back all together, I lost everything in my house except my refrigerator and my dishwasher, including every light bulb. Wow. So please don't talk to me about PSEG.
Did they cover any of it?
Unbelievable.
Did they cover any of it? No.
Well, they did, because I happen to have been a friend of Tim Bishop.
Lucky.
And I made them do it. They wanted me to use my insurance company, but I wouldn't. Well, we're looking at your candidacy, and we're saying to ourselves, this is a guy who understands the future and understands that we need to come into this century.
The other part of the future is the demographics. And we have to look at a huge aging population on Long Island.
Oh, God.
Which is another tsunami, because you're going to lose volunteerism, volunteer fire departments and ambulance corps, possibly going to paid staff. So we have to watch that. If we don't fix the housing crisis in Long Island for younger people, we will continue to lose them. We're not looking forward, and the numbers are there. The warning signs are there. And as well, immigration issues. We have a tremendous immigrant population, undocumented. Part of what I do in SCORE, actually, is try and get them to the right attorneys to help their immigration issues. I have bumper stickers in Spanish, too. Vote for Greg, but I do. I'm the only politician with Spanish language bumper stickers that I know of. It's an important issue. And to ignore it or demonize it is not the way to go. Though we have a huge conservative population at this end of the island, as well in my area on the North Fork where I live. They're completely ultra-liberal on immigration.
Well, we are looking forward to November the 8th, my dear.
Thank you.
That's our day of reckoning, and I hope that I can say to you, oh, look, you won.
Oh, that would be so great.
That would be wonderful.
It's been a long road, too.
Yeah, I can imagine. Must be a tremendous amount of stress on the body and the mind doing all this stuff.
Yesterday, 6 events. 5 I made. They just ran out of time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is something, isn't it? Well, my money's on you.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to it.